All right, so let's go ahead and talk about AI business transformation. And Swathi, I'm going to get started with you. AI is a wonderful thing, but often we talk about it in sort of the abstract or the generalizations. Talk a little bit about the successes you've seen integrating AI into business operations, but then the challenges and how organizations can overcome them.
Yeah, sure. I think when it comes to AI, I think we hit a tipping point with ChatGPT, and a lot of us, what I call, use AI as citizen services, right? We just use ChatGPT to ask any questions, but when it comes to enterprises and large organizations, small organizations, businesses, it's a different side of the story. And AI is such a broad term. I want to differentiate into what ChatGPT is, the generative AI, and the traditional AI, which I've worked in the last 8 years, is more machine learning, which is more like algorithm driven. And just to differentiate both, I think the power of generative AI is basically to generate newer content. It could also do prediction, but I wouldn't recommend using that since it consumes a lot of power compared to traditional machine learning. So when it comes to digital transformation, I think there are three main steps that organizations take to get to a successful AI implementation. Number one, and this is the most important and sometimes not enough attention is being paid, is the use case. What I like to call is, what hair on fire problem are you trying to solve with AI, right? So one example I can give is predictive analytics of maintenance of equipment in one of the largest passenger railroad in this country. And there, I think we had to narrow down into what are we predicting? Is it wheels? Is it particular boxes of passenger cars? Or what are you predicting first? And secondly, find the relevant data and the historical data for that. So once you're very, very particular about the use case, identify when this particular wheel will actually be coming up for repair. And so you're predicting in advance so that you prevent the downtime. That was the use case. And secondly, make sure you have the data and make sure you know what you're looking for in the metrics, right? So with digital transformation, the use case identification is the main thing, and then defining your success metrics. What does success look like? Today, you're getting a call in the middle of Colorado that the wheel has come off and you have to make all the passengers get down from the train. Instead, if you could predict that this wheel is up for repair 2 weeks before the train started to move, you could actually take action, proactively prevent, any impact to your passengers. So identifying the use case is the most important, and that's where people fail to go to production and deployment. So those are the main things. In generative AI, I'm doing one for one of the local public sector agencies, more citizen services driven, and other generative AI use cases around insurance tech. But all in all, whether you're implementing traditional AI or generative AI, the main thing is identifying use cases. And the other thing is, if you're in a regulated industry like finance or like healthcare, where you have to observe HIPAA, financial regulations, and it's even more important to build your responsible AI systems. Building a cross-functional team, multi-stakeholder conversations is more important. It's building responsible AI does not lie just with data scientists and technologists. It's a cross-functional responsibility. Bring your HR and legal and everyone into the conversation to understand the implications of what you're building. So those are some things to keep in mind.
And I think for some people, picking out a use case is important because they might start too broad. I think for others, they actually don't know what the use cases are. And that's where obviously conversations like this, networking with people over the coffee breaks, just to get ideas. For Krisztina, Swathi's perspective is coming from a place in business where everyone pretty much agrees that AI is a good thing. But in education, I think it's a little bit more nuanced of where does AI fit into the role for faculty and for students. So talk a little bit about maybe the challenges that you're seeing in education and how you may or may not be trying to overcome the resistance for adopting AI.
Thank you. Yes, there is a lot of resistance. And typically that resistance stems for probably three main areas. One of them is faculty will tell you, oh, it doesn't apply to my discipline. Although when it's crystal clear that that discipline is the perfect place where students can actually learn how to use AI tools and how to enhance their learning skills or the learning process itself. The other form of resistance is just not liking the idea of AI. So we have now this, and it's not just at my university, I can see this at other universities as well, that faculty sort of migrate towards different tribes, and then we have those who embrace AI and those who are sort of the never AIers. And you know, they will give you all sorts of reasons why. And at this point, I don't know if it's worth debating, because we know that even the society itself is pretty tribal as well, so then we just see that in a sort of a smaller version. And the third one is lack of incentives. You can, of course, recommend that teachers participate in professional development activities, and those activities can be about how you can adopt AI, how you can integrate AI into your teaching, and how you can teach students how to leverage AI tools so then they become empowered learners. And because of those lack of incentives, there's little learning actually taking place. I think that American University is one university out of many where people just don't know where to start, how to approach this learning. And so at this time, there's a lot of talk among faculty, but very little action. If you think about faculty members who are, let's say, tenured professors, it's very, very difficult to tell them, you know, you should be learning these tools because of your promotion, because of your job security. They are good. So they say, well. However, I did approach tenure faculty and I asked them, okay, what do you want? Like, how can I convince you to participate? And it was very simple. Their response was very simple. They said, can you give us gift cards if we participate? And I just thought, really? Yeah. So then I have something. And I just thought, okay, what else? Well, we can earn badges like in Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts. And I thought, okay, I can design some badges if that's what we're talking about, no problem. Or, you know, can we get food when we attend? So if it's lunchtime, we would like to have lunch, we would like to have coffee. Now here's the catch, right? So you would think, easy. Not now, because unfortunately most universities are facing huge budget cuts. We have something called the enrollment cliff. We have fewer students enrolling. We just don't have enough funding, and not just our university. This is something that's happening across. And so even if faculty asks, they ask so little, I feel like I can't deliver because we don't have the budget. Then where am I going to take money away for this? So this is a huge problem. Like I said, even if I just want to give out like a $25 Amazon gift card or something, I can't because I don't have the money. I can bring cookies and maybe coffee, but that's all the budget allows. And when I talk about the tribal nature, that's also a huge problem, because at this point we have faculty who either say, I'm all in, if you're my student, you can use any AI tools, just tell me how you used it. Or faculty say zero AI, no AI. And once I start talking about, well, AI is kind of everywhere. So even if you say no AI, then essentially your students cannot even do a Google search. And so is that what you're banning? Well, no. And so then the conversation, continues. And so there's that confusion, and obviously that AI literacy training is missing. So clearly that's an issue. And I tell faculty that you banning AI or you're saying you're all in are equally damaging for students, because they are not going to learn how to use AI responsibly and ethically if you give them those two. And finally, what I wanted to mention is we don't yet have opportunities for faculty to actually play with platforms that they might be able to integrate into their teaching. When you say generative AI, they think about ChatGPT, and they think about students writing their homework with ChatGPT, and they can't even imagine what else is out there. And so at this stage, I'm looking for companies that can come to campus and do a demo and show it to our faculty. You know, we have this product and this is what it can do. This is how your students can become so much stronger and so much better at what you want them to become. This is how you can personalize that learning experience. And you don't have to do the coding, and you don't have to do you can just decide that you want to go with this platform and embed it in your course. So I think that, you know, it's getting more clear day by day that that's what we need. We need that sort of the play area where faculty can experiment with it, but we also need that guidance, because sometimes we have faculty members who are older. They are okay with digital technology, but they still need that hands-on experience, that in-person guidance, because watching a YouTube video or a tutorial is just not helpful enough for them.
Yeah, I feel like you gave many examples of using, the carrot versus the stick. I happen to keep in touch with some professors from my alma mater. They were telling me how there's a requirement now to essentially say, here's how I'm using AI in my course, and if you don't have an answer to it, I think the expectation was you're not gonna, I don't know, maybe you'll get fired or not, I don't know. All right, Bhaumik. We've talked about some of the challenges, some of the ways that there might be some resistance. Like, inspire us a little bit. Like, what do you think are the industries that are gonna benefit the most from AI, and you know, where you're excited about it going?
Yeah, so to start with, I think probably the AI breakthrough that we have been seeing, right, last couple of years, I think it's quite equivalent to what we saw in 2000 for the .com. Probably that's where we saw the businesses like Amazon, Google, and Meta came to exist, and they led the wave of innovation. I think similarly, whoever will use or evolve and adapt AI better way will have the same ride the next wave of innovation. So my perspective is, I think pretty much all the businesses, I'm sure people here are from different industries, be it marketing, startup, cloud businesses, healthcare or fintech, etc. I think everyone will get a benefit here and there because there's use case for everyone. But from my perspective, I'm probably seeing cybersecurity going to be one of that top list, given now security is concern for everyone, and nowadays it's taking almost, let's say you have a threat and then it takes hours or days for someone to detect and respond to it. With the AI, we can probably bring it down to seconds or milliseconds, or maybe sometimes you can detect even the breach before it happens. The another example is we are working with one of the fintech customers, and they are doing fraud-based AI detection. So whenever the transaction goes through, the AI detects whether this is based on multiple parameters, whether it's a fraudulent activity or not, and then that helps them detect and stop those kind of transactions and be better at it. So that's an amazing application how you can use the AI in the fintech. Then we have a lot of startups which are adopting clouds. I think last time when we checked, cloud adoption was still less than 50%. So now it's gonna still go more and more. So a lot of things that we do in the cloud, like access control, identity management, all the cloud control, monitoring, we can just simply automate with the AI. We don't need someone to just sit there as a DevOps engineer and manually do that tedious work. I think that also is a great application on how businesses can use it and evolve. So overall, I think AI is not going to change how business operate, but how it's going to compete. So probably in the next 5 or 10 years, we have been seeing every day in the news okay, this Amazon is investing 10 billion or Meta is investing 15 billion or whatever in the AI. So whoever not just invest but also adopt pretty well and upskill their employees, help them adopt it and learn about AI, how to use it in their organizations, I think will have an upper hand.
Transitioning a little bit now from just talking about AI and business transformation, I find thinking a lot about the future of the workforce really interesting. And I should have pulled this stat ahead of this panel, but I saw something that just came out recently about even just the gender disparities between the fact that it's most common right now that men are using AI in their day-to-day, and some ratio of 4-to-1 or 3-to-1 to women using AI in their day-to-day. Anyway, we'll go get those stats. Don't quote me on that specifically. But coming back to Krisztina, who you're spending so much time in the education of people to use AI in the university, I'd be curious if you could just speak a little bit on what do you think about, where do you see the future of the workforce going? What are you trying to train these people to be ultimately? Where are we trying to get to, I guess, as a society using generative AI in our day-to-day?
Well, that's a very difficult question because I don't think that most of us know. And that's actually the question that we are guessing on campus. We don't know what we're preparing our students for. And we have people in place at the university, career advisors, who are looking at companies and they're looking at sort of forms of employment. They're looking at those skills that students might need. And that's one of the reasons why I'm a vocal advocate for teaching students AI literacy skills. So then at least they know how to collaborate with AI tools, sort of co-intelligence with AI tools, so they can get tasks done more efficiently, faster. I mean, I'm still surprised when students submit work and it has typos and punctuation and whatnot, and I'm thinking, where did you come from? And how can you not leverage tools that are at your fingertips, literally? But yeah, so the big question is, I think that that could be part of the reluctance on faculty's behalf to not really adopting these tools because they don't even know what they should be promoting in their classes and how they could prepare for students to leverage some of these tools. I think that a logical step would be for companies to come to campus and talk to the students. I often feel that students are resistant to adopt these tools because they look at the headlines and they think, oh, it says that if I use AI, that I cheat and I lie, so I'm just not gonna even try. We know cases where students are leveraging AI and professors are playing this gotcha game with them and drag them through academic integrity violation cases and whatnot. So, and all the students are doing is they're just, let's say, using Grammarly, something that simple. And so we have we are on these uncharted territories and people are kind of afraid what to do. But like I said, I think one logical next step would be for companies to actually come to campuses and talk to students about what you can do and just finally move beyond the you can use ChatGPT to do this and that, because I think that is something that is holding us back, that we're still in this mindset that it can write the essay for us, as opposed to, you know what, there are a variety of AI tools that you can, but they don't know. And so I think that holding an exhibit or a mini convention or something would be amazing for university campuses.
Bhaumik, I'm curious from your perspective. So obviously in the school setting, there's a little bit of like, oh, should you use it? Should you not use it? One of the things that I found that when I eventually entered the working world was things like citing your sources, plagiarism, like those things don't exist anymore. So I'm curious, where are you seeing AI in people's day to day? And more importantly, are you seeing managers require people to use AI or encourage people to use AI in the same way that you may or may not be seeing it in school, but it's part of the conversation?
I think yeah, we do. Like probably myself and my leadership team, like we always ask people, encourage them to use AI, because a lot of things that we are doing in security, we can save a lot of time and efforts if we just ask the same question to ChatGPT or use some AI tools to do that. So it has changed dramatically in the professional world as well. Other than that, any times you have to read a long report, TLDR, it's not too long, don't read. So it helps you summarize that as well. So you probably don't need to spend a lot of time on reading those reports and summarizing yourself. Apart from that, what I've seen, there's a lot of talk about, I would say it's a myth, but about AI will take job from the human. I don't think so. It's human versus AI. It's more of a human plus AI. So if you have the skills and power to use AI properly, I think you can be more efficient and focus yourself working on creative work and the higher value work rather than working on things like moving tickets from the backlog or reading through the reports or respond. These are all you can easily offload to the AI and focus on more creative work.
One of the things I think, as cliched as it sounds, and you would have heard this saying, AI is not going to take your job, but those who know AI is going to take your job, which is very true. And I'm sure there's a diversity of sectors of industries in this audience. Think of what are some places that you could save time or money and find those use cases. And I write proficiently on LinkedIn, so I had this step-by-step things, right? Identify 3 use cases in your industry, just Google search that they have implemented AI, go to your boss and pitch it, right? So you're ahead of your colleague there and then itself, right? So I think of the talent in the workforce question as short-term and long-term. What is going to happen in the next 10 years, 50 years, 100 years, right? And the answer is different. I think 10 years we do, I think, encourage everybody to use AI. It will be just the tool in the toolbox. But 20 years is where it's going to really shift, right? Because society's adoption rate should catch up with the rate of innovation, and I think that is going to come closer in the 20 years time frame and 100 years time frame. I think the Stanley Kubrick's movies, Superintelligence and Artificial Intelligence, I think there's potential to come true.
Swathi, tell us a little bit, first, what do you even see as responsible use of AI, or help us through a little bit of some boundaries around that, and then best practices, lessons learned that you've seen working with organizations within that.
So when it comes to bias, right? So AI, we all know, is based on data and historical data mainly. So the prevention of bias is impossible almost. Sometimes it's also about what are the human stories behind this data. So I'll tell you an example. So I was working on a use case to find out what the geographical locations where COVID vaccinations have less adoption or percentage of vaccinated people is lower than the rest of the country in the United States. And this is with one of the public sector agencies. And there was some pockets in the Midwest where it was really, really low, right? So when you're building some algorithm to look at trends and patterns, when the data is very low and insignificant, our usual process is to ignore that data because it's skewed data. It's an outlier data point, so you can easily ignore that and go with the rest of the data to find the patterns. But we dug deep. Actually, this was a policy maker. She questioned the data. She was like, I want to dig deep into why there's only less than 1%. And the story was that that particular region in the Midwest did not even have access to any healthcare facilities. They had to travel a long distance because of the population being so low in those counties and states and small towns. Like they had to travel such a long distance, but predominantly they're working in like a job where it is agriculture, meat processing, that they couldn't even take time off and go. So there's so much human story behind this, the fact that this data was so low, right? And we as data scientists would tend to ignore it, but her questioning the data and building that collaboration highlighted the fact that the fact is there is a lot of stories. So I call it human metrics. Look at the data with the lens of human metrics in order to make sure it's not biased and make sure you have covered all the demographic. Secondly is transparency of data, right? We still struggle with transparency. So we know DeepSeek, we know ChatGPT, we still don't know the data it was trained on. And there has been a story by Time that it was trained on all this data, and it uses both traditional machine learning and other techniques, and it also used humans in Africa to verify the data. This is the human in the loop for the reinforcement learning. And so Time ran a story that these workers sitting in Africa that verified the data that ChatGPT used to consume and build the models on, actually they were paying pennies on the dollar, right? So they did not even know what this data was getting used for, right, once ChatGPT. So we still struggle with the question of transparency, and we know New York Times and other newspapers sued ChatGPT a while back, saying that they took copyrighted information. I know personally friends who are artists like photographers, and they know that models have been trained on their data. So the transparency question is very nuanced. It's still an ongoing struggle and debate, but when building your own responsible AI systems in your organization, make sure first you take consent from the users, and too often we forget that. So if you have a SaaS product, for example, you are using the members' data for various predictions, right? At the minimum, they should be aware of it. So transparency is at most important. And thirdly, there is this new term called interpretability or explainability. What does it mean? I'll tell you a simple example. A lot of us are in the Washington, D.C. area. You could relate to this. So CMS, Center for Medicare and Medicaid, actually has the fraud detection program, right? So it has, if a doctor and a provider is unnecessarily charging high amounts to a patient, they would flag the person, and they would actually give a warning, and to the extent they can actually revoke their license to practice. These are doctors we are speaking about, these are physicians we are speaking about, right? And right now they use statistical analysis, because obviously claims data is millions of records of data. They use statistical analysis. Now, we did a proof of concept to use machine learning instead of statistical analysis, and one of the questions we had to answer is, typically if you flag a doctor saying, hey, you have done fraud and we are going to revoke your license, the doctor could put a case on you on CMS and say, no, prove to me how you're saying that. So they usually go to Department of Justice and they will show the statistical analysis. Actually, they do that. And based on this, we figured this pattern, right? So there are particular parameters. So if you use machine learning, it's not necessarily that we have to show the algorithm, but we have to show what is the weightage of the parameters that you're using to make this determination. And you could apply the same if you are a private financial institution and there is some fraud detection algorithm. So interpretability is interpreting the results of your AI and actually explaining it in a common language. You don't need to know the math behind it. You need to provide the weightage of the different parameters. You could say to the doctor, in the last 5 years that we have noticed you you have said that this 500 patients of yours, you have recommended them to go do an ultrasound, and that was not needed. So that is a particular parameter that we should be able to say, the machine learning has to be able to say. So that's this factor called interpretability. And there's a lot of research still going on because generative AI, it's more difficult to do interpretation. So these are the three main aspects that you have to think about. Apart from that, if you're in a regulated industry, obviously you have to have your checkboxes for your HIPAA, for your privacy of user data consent, etc. But I think in general, it is a best practice whether you're regulated or not.
I think I at least look at a difference between like responsible use of AI and the security of AI.
Yeah, definitely.
So Bhaumik, I was hoping you could like speak a little bit around like, okay, so there's all these things we need to be mindful of from like this ethical privacy perspective, but like what is the security of AI look like? How do we implement that?
Yes, apart from what probably Swathi already mentioned, I think the fundamental of security for anything still remain the same. Underneath the model, you have a hardware like a server, you have a hard disk, you have a memory, so everything like fundamentally still remain the same. However, what we currently don't have is the framework, so people can follow the framework and build the model accordingly. So I'll give you an example. For security, we have multiple frameworks a SOC 2, HIPAA, PCI, then we have ISO 27001 and etc. Right? But for AI, we don't have any regulated frameworks which can be imposed. So there is a GDPR, probably you all are aware of, in the that's for the European entity. But similarly, they have also launched an AI Act called European Union AI Act, which regulates the transparency and bias of all the AI models. So similarly, maybe similar thing, we can also have it worldwide, or at least for the US government as well, which would help regulate a lot of security of the AI models. Another example is when I was testing the some of the models in Alexa, we had of course some of the our secret sauce called test cases where we check whether the AI models, how does the AI model respond to some of these questions. Does it reveal a lot of information that it should not? Maybe it's kind of a gray area between you call it security or hallucination or the bias of information. For example, if you ask ChatGPT what is the address of Mark Zuckerberg, right? It's sometimes it will give you an answer, sometimes it will not give you an answer. But if it does, you don't know if it's a real answer or not. But it's very fine line between the security, because sometimes I can inject a payload to the ChatGPT which gives me the information which is only specifically for the private maybe their internal staff or something. Similarly, a lot of organizations are now using AI for their intranet. So for instance, if the new join is on board, they can ask they have question on, let's say, what is my leave policy, or what is where do I find this help, or etc. So they're implementing all of this. Maybe sometimes you're missing a security guardrails where someone has just joined, but now they can also, using the AI interface, they can interact with your servers, and now that's another security loophole in your system. So probably the businesses have to make sure, maybe they can take a help from one of these framework, which is either from European or ISO has also launched a management system called 42001. That's also has some nowadays we are also, a lot of vendors are using AI. So when we onboard a vendor, we make sure whether they have done their due diligence with all the transparency and whatever Swathi had talked about, whether they have done all of this before we bring them on board, because it might create another loophole into my system if I just integrate them with as is. So yeah, there are a lot of guardrails needs to be implemented, a lot of testing has to be done, and a lot of people have to devote their time and make sure the labeling of the data when the training AI models are done properly. So all of this combined, I think it's going to be not an easy task, I must say, because I've seen that in person. We have had like almost 15 to 20 back and forth iteration between the builders and the testers of the models. So it's not going to be an easy task, but yeah, I think as we evolve, I think we'll figure it out.
Well, thank you all for your thoughts. As your, I guess, like lightning round, last question, DeepSeek this week. What was your reaction when you first read the news? And then how are you thinking about it now, a week or so, 5 or so days later, that the audience should maybe take away about how it's changing the landscape? And let's just start with Swathi and go down the...
Sure, it was exciting when I downloaded it over the weekend and started playing and started comparing, giving the same prompts to ChatGPT and DeepSeek. And also the nerd in me wanted to download some research papers and read what was different and how, because I did implement reinforcement learning for the United Nations-led startup, so I had to see what was different using reinforcement learning on lesser labeled data sets and so on. So that's the technology, right? There is a lot of innovation. So I think from a technology perspective, we always thought the innovation had to happen at the server level, at the GPU level, but now the technology is happening at the mathematical model level. So that's a different sort of innovation. That's an observation from a technology perspective. But from the performance perspective, it was very impressive until it crashed 2 days back. But it was super impressive that it could, the reasoning model was on par with ChatGPT. And thirdly, what was more exciting for me was to look at the price of it. Their APIs cost like, 1/8 of what ChatGPT API cost. And since I'm implementing for enterprises, which are very concerned about the price of 1 million tokens, it's really enticing for enterprise use cases. What really was concerning for me was when I asked questions about Tiananmen Square incident, about Taiwan, it refuses to provide answers. And the interesting thing is with ChatGPT, like suppose you ask a question how to make a bomb, and it won't at the first question, it will say it won't answer, but you can enwrap the question in a story and you can get around it. But for DeepSeek, even when I wrapped it around the story, I'm writing a fictitious story of this girl who's a college student and she goes to this Tiananmen Square in 1989, it totally stopped me. So that was very, very concerning, right? Because we are talking about responsible and ethical AI, and so the decision for people, technologists like me, who are implementing enterprise use cases, the customer would say, hey, DeepSeek is so much cheaper than ChatGPT, why don't you use it, right? So there's a whole decision-making process, because on one hand, it is cheaper. Yes, it's open source to the extent you can change the model parameters and fine-tune it, not necessarily the underlying data set. The other thing is if you use their APIs and not necessarily locally host it on your own computers, which means you have to upgrade your servers or whatever, you don't know where the data is going in China or how they're utilizing it, right? So there are all these ethical concerns, but as a technologist, it means super excited about the innovation. It's on par. I wouldn't say better, but on par with ChatGPT. And I think one thing is right now it's not very multimodal. I like the ChatGPT voice on my app, which I think it's a matter of time they will introduce it. And for those of you who want to know more, on my LinkedIn, if you connect with me, I have multiple downloadable PDFs. One for ethical AI, how do you do a lead stage evaluation, and 2 about DeepSeek, about the use cases and what does it mean to use, and what are some nuances that you should think about.
And we did get the 1-minute warning, so please share your thoughts on DeepSeek, but I think I'm going to get the hook very soon. So anyway.
All right. So just quickly, I think what Swathi said, right? Like if I ask DeepSeek about who owns Taiwan, then DeepSeek will obviously it has been trained on some data, so it will say it's part of an integral entity of China, which is obviously it's not. But if you ask ChatGPT, the answer is different, right? So there's obviously a trust issue. I don't think so it's gonna get adopted in US pretty well. Probably how it is right now. It's gonna take time. We saw the reaction on the Wall Street, I think on Monday, whenever the news came out. I think it was a bit overreacted. I think the business here we have in the US still going to outperform and still going to have a majority of the stake in terms of how the AI will be used by most of our enterprises.
So when DeepSeek arrived, then I started playing with it and used the same prompts that I use with ChatGPT, and I would say that it scored just as well as ChatGPT. So I liked what it was producing. The prompts that I tried out were prompts when I ask AI to be an AI coach or a mentor for the student and talk them through a complex task. So then it worked just fine. And as far as the who stole what, who copied what and violated copyrights and so on, when this whole argument and back and forth appeared in the media, that reminded me of, there used to be an HBO show called Silicon Valley, and I just thought, this is the real version of what we watched throughout several seasons. And I'm curious to see where it will go. So
we have a wonderful day of AI conversation today. Let's thank our panelists, and thank you everyone.